Rolling. And you guys all ready?
Everybody's rolling.
Okay.
My nose itches. Okay, should we start with introductions?
I'll count you down.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, we are going to start with introductions, everybody, and Mr. Hunter, we'll start with you. I'll start, and then everyone, if we could say our name and spell our name as identifiers. Mr. Hunter, you can start.
My name is Philip Hunter, Phillip, Hunter, Hunter.
I'm Harriet Lacewell, Harriette Lacewell.
I'm Herman Davis, Herman Davis, Davis.
My name is William Merritt, William, capital Merritt.
Geraldine Huggins, Geraldine Huggins.
Michonne Lartigue, Michonlartigue. Well, thank you very much, you all, for being here. We are here with a group of Selma natives, and we're very excited with the upcoming anniversary of the 50th anniversary of Bloody Sunday. We felt it was important to talk to native Selma residents who could tell us about the time, during that time, some of the things that they experienced, some of the stories that they experienced. So we're very grateful to have all of you here today. So thank you very much for being here. I wanted to start by sort of mixing both the past and the present. And so if you could, some of you could tell us if you were at the Bloody Sunday March, and what do you think is most important about the 50th anniversary? And any of you, Mr. Merritt, would you like to start?
I know I was not at the Bloody Sunday March. In fact, I was a student at Stillman College at the time.
Okay.
But I think it's very important that we look back 50 years ago to see the differences that what has happened then and what's happening today. So I think it's very important that we don't forget the history.
Mm-hmm. Now, Phil, I know you were at the march.
Yes, I participated in all three marches. The first one, I think that was about March the 7th, 1965, and that's what we generally call Bloody Sunday. So me and my partners in crime, we fellow athletes, we generally march together for safety. So you want me to elaborate?
Well, I do. I want to hear, but can you tell us, because we'll definitely get into, I would love for you to take us to that day, but I would love to hear your opinion on what's the importance of the 50th anniversary coming up.
The importance is that back then, I was 17 years old when I participated in Bloody Sunday. I was not eligible to vote. So as students at R.B. Hudson High School and other students in the surrounding area, it was important for us to make a statement so that our parents could vote. Not only parents, but all those that were eligible, black citizens who were denied the right to vote. So we were, in essence, marching for them. And we had no fear, we had fear, but no fear in securing the right for them to vote and participate. Without that Bloody Sunday and the action that Lyndon Johnson, President Johnson, subsequently took, we wouldn't have President Obama.
That's right. Miss Harriet, now I know you were not in Selma, correct?
Right. I wasn't in Selma, but my mother was there, and she participated in the marches. But we were very concerned about her safety and what was going on down there. But I was here at Howard in my last year when that was going on. But 50 years later, she always pushed us towards education and be the best of what you could be. And I think she was my role model, and you know, I did the best that I could do and was the best that I am, was.
Now, Geraldine, I know that you were in Selma. Did you participate in the marches?
Yeah, my brother Lawrence, my sister-in-law Dorothea, and I went to Roundtable every night. And we were there, Dorothea, Lawrence, and I, for the march. But Lawrence wouldn't let us go with the guys. You know, he said, "You guys stay here." And we were at the church when they came back. You know, all the smoke and everything. You know, it was something.
Yeah.
It was very interesting. Yeah, but I was there throughout.
And what do you think is most important about the 50th anniversary?
I think it's very important, and it's super important that the young people know what we went through, and now they will have to make a stand on whatever is crippling them in their lives in order to make it better for the next generation.
Now, Herman, last but not least, now I know you were not in Selma for Bloody Sunday, but can you tell me what you think about the importance and what you heard from afar?
Well, at that particular time, I was living in Oakland, California, and I got up one morning, and on the front page of the paper was my brother standing on the roof of near the church, Brown Chapel Church. I'm still amazed how he managed to get on the roof, but you know, the other participants in the march was there. And I wanted to be there, but you know, separated by miles. But I think the significance of the 50th anniversary it's very important to let the younger generations know what, you know, the sacrifices that were made to get the right to vote, and unfortunately some failed to vote. Typical example, you know, this election that we had, the midterm elections, basically we failed to turn out, you know, to vote. Only, it seems as though we only take the major presidential elections seriously.
And I actually want to ask all of you all a little bit later about that dynamic, about sort of what you all saw and sort of where younger folks are today. But before we go there, I would love to, for those of you who were in Selma during that time, can you sort of take us back to just before the marchers were attacked, a couple of days before, you know, what was going on that you remember or experienced?
Well, we had gone to Mariontown, I believe, where a person had been killed by the state troopers.
Jimmy Lee Jackson?
Yes. And so a lot of the young folks and a lot of folks out of Selma attended that funeral up on a hill. And so the leadership, I guess, at that time determined that we should march and express our disillusionment with the police, the state police department, Wallace, the governor, and all of the discriminatory practices that existed back then. So leadership decided that we should march to Montgomery. And so that preceded that, and we were provided instructions on safety, how they act, don't carry any weapons. If they tear gas us, don't rub your eyes. So we had received some training, especially since it was a non-violent march, not to strike back.
Okay.
And so with that type of understanding, with some of us who were participated in a nonviolent march, but we were violent. But we knew how to contain that part of our personality so that no one would get hurt. So it was pretty tense leading up to that. A lot of folks were encouraging their children not to march. A lot were saying march. And we had leaders from all over the country coming in. A call went out, not the big call, that, hey, we're going to do this. So many folks from the surrounding counties and out of state came together at Brown's Chapel Church, and that's when we started organizing. And state troopers were all around. Sheriff Jim Clark and his posse surrounded the church, and so there was a lot of activity going on.
Okay, and so, Ms. Gerald, you were in Selma. What did you see in that same time period, a few days? Was it sort of similar, do you remember?
I can't. Before the march? Okay, after the call went out to the nation, that week people were coming in from everywhere, literally.
And that was after Bloody Sunday, correct?
That was before Bloody Sunday,
Before,
leading
I
up to
see.
Bloody Sunday.
Okay.
And we had meetings every night, preparing people for what they may encounter and whatever. But the march went off very well. I was on the street looking at the people pass by. There were people there. It was a beautiful sight.
What was beautiful about it?
The purpose.
And so for those of you who weren't there, Mr. Merritt, what did you hear before leading up to Bloody Sunday? Did you hear from family members? What were you getting from a long distance?
Well, I was about 75 miles away in Tuscaloosa and attending Stillman College, and we didn't really get a lot of information about the march itself, and it was only after Bloody Sunday that we get the information, and we did participate in the final leg of the Bloody Sunday at the speeches in Montgomery with Dr. Martin Luther King.
Okay, so was that the case for you two as well? Did you not necessarily hear much about the first march and from a long distance, or did you know about it?
Well, I knew about the first march because that was when the horses and the gas, they were pushed back across the bridge.
Before the march, did you hear any information about it, or did you know that march was going to be happening?
I don't think so.
No.
I can't remember.
Herman? No. Okay. So once the marchers were attacked, Mr. Hunter, you were there. What did you experience? What did you see?
I was in the middle of the pack.
Okay.
I wasn't that brave like John Lewis and the leadership up front. They generally want the leaders of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, CORE, and a couple other groups were up front. And they had already experienced some banging of heads and different kinds of situations. But me and my partners, we were in the middle. We were athletes. So, you have to feed off of each other because it was very scary. Once we got to the apex of the bridge and we looked down and all of us said, oh my goodness, what have we gotten ourselves into? And the deputies and the posse were all around. They had these long billy clubs, and they had their canisters for tear gas and all those other kinds of things, waiting. So once they stopped us because I'm not sure if it was Jim Clark or one of the other deputies, state troopers said, "You all halt, turn around and go back." And before we realized it, because we weren't turning around willingly, they released the canisters and the tear gas. Like I said, we had been informed at Brown Chapel not to rub our eyes because we kind of figured they were going to release tear gas. And so Bedlam broke out. We started running, and we were trying to outrun the tear gas.
Okay.
And the Alabama River was on the side, and we were rushing toward the river. And I realized I couldn't swim that well, so I couldn't jump in the river. The only thing I could do was dog paddle. And the river was flowing, it was too wide to cross. So we turned around and went in the back of the building on the side of the river and waited until things died down. Folks were being hit and brutalized, and the horses were all over the place. The tear gas had got us because we couldn't really see. And the scent of it was strong. Not only the tearing made us tear, but the scent was also choking. And so once the posse pushed us back and were swinging on folks, we were just running wild in essence.
And so you were on the street, Miss Geraldine, right? So you were at the church. You were back at the church, and so one moment, hold, Jennifer. I'm sorry, is the light okay with that door? It's not closed all the way? Okay, so for ease, I'm gonna ask you the question again, just in terms of editing. Can we go? So, Ms. Geraldine, you were at the church. So while you were waiting at the church, what did you expect, and then what happened?
Well, we were just there waiting, and when the people came back, of course they were smelling like tear gas and everything. And after they got back, I don't remember if there was an assembly or people just went home. Do you remember, Phil?
There was an assembly. We assembled at the church because some folks had to, where they were hit, they had to go to the hospital and were bandaged up, and some were hospitalized, and some may have had asthma or whatever.
And so what was the overall feeling, and how did you all feel being there? What were your first reactions?
I think after you're involved in a scrimmage or war, you become, at least for us, we became more emboldened.
Yeah.
Okay.
I felt nothing.
We you know, the song "We Shall Overcome" really resonated with some of us. They're going to do this to us, and we had been also briefed that the cameras would be present, and so to show the brutality of law enforcement and George Wallace. And so we achieved that objective. Our leaders told us that stay nonviolent, let them act out. Let Jim Clark act out. And this is actually what part of the strategy was, to allow them to act out, but we didn't know they were going to act out to the degree that they did.
Mm-hmm. Now, Ms. Geraldine, you said you didn't feel anything.
I felt nothing. My sisters, well, they were all up in Ohio, and of course, you know, when you're not there, it's worse than being there. I had no feelings because really, by all intentions, they weren't bothering the citizens. They were bothering the outside people. They were the agitators. And I think that Bloody Sunday is the best thing that could have ever happened in America because it opened the eyes to the world.
And that is something that I've heard in a lot of the things that I've read. And so for those of you who weren't there, what was your reaction when you saw what was happening? Because I understand it was on TV that night? Immediately? Okay. And so what was your reaction?
Personally, I was very shocked. Not surprised, but I was shocked it took place. And so therefore, afterwards, I got a tremendous interest in the developments because I would call home every day and found out if anything new is happening or what is going to take place in the future.
Herman?
I recognize quite a few of from the news coverage, I recognize quite a few of the victims, the ones that the horses and the tear gas, overcome. And some of them had disabilities that they passed away with from, being trampled by the horses. And it's unfortunately that they wasn't compensated in terms of lawsuits.
Their families.
Yeah.
Miss Harriet?
Go ahead.
Miss Harriet?
I was very concerned too when I was watching it on TV and talked to my family at home. I mean, just to see all of that on TV, the running and the screaming and the horses trampling them down, and the state troopers, storm troopers, I think that's what we called them, were beating them with the sticks and things. And my mother said the smell of the smoke, it just got in your eyes and burned you all up. And I mean, just to see people and children, because I had a younger brother, and he was in it too with the rest of the young people. It was just awesome. But like Miss Geraldine said, it was opening the world's eyes. So it was all over the world.
So I want to ask you all for just 1 minute to go back to, and I think it's important to hear your experience of the civil rights movement coming to Selma. And so were any of you or any of your family members involved with the Dallas County Voters League or involved in the voting rights?
Well, my brother Lawrence he's an eye on the prize. You will see the teachers marching to the courthouse and the sheriff Billy Club right here. That's my brother.
When he's hitting, I know exactly what you're
It
talking
went
about.
around the world. One of his friends from Vietnam sent him a picture. So, yeah.
My father was, back in the 40s, was involved in the movement. And with the Brown decision, I think even before the Brown decision in '54, he and others protested the failure of the Selma County school system to integrate. And so he was a preacher, Reverend J.D. Hunter, and an activist. And they later dubbed them the Courageous Eight. And they were dubbed that because they refused, after they petitioned the superintendent to integrate, it was over 100 names. They published the names in the local paper, the Selma Times Journal. And most of the folks either recanted, even signing the petition, and most of them were terminated from their job. So the Courageous Eight said, no, we stand. So part of that is why our family was involved. My father never said, don't get involved. I had a younger sister, Jacqueline, and she's in one of the books back there. She provided a narrative on her experience, but all of us, the whole family, was involved. And as a result of my father's involvement, he was blacklisted. He couldn't buy a car, he couldn't buy a stamp in Selma. And so the children had it rough along with the family. And I was telling some of my friends here that Sometimes they say, we coming to cut your electricity off. And his curse word was John Brown. He said, John Brown, come on and cut it off. And they cut it off. So we were in the dark and in the cold for months sometimes, because he refused to buckle to racism and discrimination.
So what other, I know that Dr. King's work and the SCLC and SNCC are often talked about when we hear about the fight in Selma. So like your father, what other groups or individuals did you all know of who were heavily involved in the voting rights? I've heard about the teachers. What other groups or people that you knew that may not have been in the forefront in the same way in terms of the media, but that you knew were fighting?
I think the maids, the custodians, folks who didn't have a lot, they're the ones in terms of unsung heroes.
When you say they're the ones, you mean unsung heroes.
Unsung heroes who lost their job and no one didn't even notice it. And so a lot of the bigger guys got the glory, but those folks who didn't have much are the ones that suffered the most.
I remember during the movement, there was a nursing home that hired about 14 black maids, and one of the maids' children was involved in the movement, had been arrested. So the owner of the nursing home called her in and chewed her out. So all of the maids, without any jobs, with all the bills, they just walked off the job permanently. So this is an example of people who, as Phil pointed out, were the unsung heroes.
And what do you think inspired that for them all to come together, and that what is the glue that you think held them together?
Well, I think what happened, it was the purpose of the movement itself in Selma. It was one man, one vote. And people in Selma didn't have the right to vote. There were all sorts of obstacles put in front of them.
Like what?
Tests, for instance, literacy tests. They would have to take a test in order to get the right to vote. It was not based on age or cognizance, or it was based strictly on being able to answer certain questions which many people of the other race could not answer themselves. So, sort of grandfather kind of a law. If your grandfather was a voter, then you could be a voter. But needless to say, your grandfathers were in slavery at the time. So those are the kinds of things that made it very, very difficult. Unfortunately for me, I had a time in jail with Congressman John Lewis, and he was really amazed at the fact that both parents were registered voters. Both of my parents were registered voters at the time.
Okay. Okay.
And even in addition to that, they had other kind of tests, whether or not how many jelly beans in a jar. Who can number? They only knew the answer, but what does that have to do with voting? And so it was Selma back then was a racist community. If you knew your place and stayed in your place, you were okay. Okay, but as the young folks, the teachers, in my opinion, just didn't march all of a sudden. The young folks embarrassed them to march. We weren't eligible, they were. So they stood because we stood. The children or the young adults. And so they moved on out and inspired others to participate.
Now, I want to go back to the death of Jimmy Lee Jackson, which was, as you described, sort of a catalyst for the first march. I assume that those of you who were in Selma knew intimately about his death. Did you all who were not there, had you heard about his death as well, that he had been shot by you had Herman? What did you hear?
Basically, I think it happened in Marion, Alabama, and I just, from what I, gathered in the news, that's about it. Yeah.
And so,
And he was shot by law enforcement, and I think Jimmy Lee was trying to protect his mother.
his mother, that's right.
And so, in other words, Selma and the surrounding counties throughout Alabama, it's hard as a citizen when you have law enforcement against you. What do you turn? You had the judicial system against you. You had the legislative body against us. So what do? We had to, the leadership said we got to go to the Capitol. And Jimmy Lee's death was that catalyst that brought folks together. A lot of folks didn't know all about that. It's just that because we were organized before Dr. King came. The strong thing about Selma is that Selma was organized. When Dr. King and the leadership left, local leadership had to carry on.
So, to ask you a question about Jimmy Lee Jackson, and I want to stay on this for a second because I want to share with you all, knowing that we were going to be talking, and I had been watching Eyes on the Prize one night, and I was watching Bridge to Freedom, and I turned it off and got online, and the events in Ferguson were happening over the death of Michael Brown. And so I'm curious to know from you all's opinion if there's any similarities that you saw as you were watching, because I myself felt like I turned off one thing and was seeing tear gas and then came to the present and was seeing tear gas. And so I just wondered if that is something that you all, as you see some of the events, particularly of African American men being murdered or killed by police officers, what that has been like for you all, having witnessed what you've seen. Miss Harriet?
I felt the same way when I saw that too. It just brought back memories of those things that happened in Selma that I did see on TV. And then to see them again at Ferguson, the riots and the killings. But they were saying also that it was a lot of outsiders coming into Ferguson the same way the outsiders came into Selma, and that things wouldn't have happened as bad as they did if the outsiders hadn't come in. But as it was, things did happen. And I don't know, they're waiting for something to really happen when they make that decision, how much explosion it will be. But yeah, I could feel it.
I feel that it's 50 years, and things are like, it's like an evolution. It's time for another movement because the police are taking over. Every day you hear of a policeman killing someone, just like this gun gives me license. That's not right.
I think they tried to demonize the victim of the shooting by highlighting, I think, later on that he may have taken some cigars from the store. But that didn't happen. I don't think anyone was aware of that. When you can shoot, it's free license to shoot a black teenager or man. That was the norm at one time. You brutalize a man or woman at your pleasure. Law enforcement did, and nothing was done, irrespective of the evidence. So if you compare it, I think each community need something to bring folks together. So in Ferguson, I think that was part of it. It was a catalyst to say, look, I mean, and if I'm wrong about this. I think the population of blacks is about 70%, and whites are 30%, but yet you only have one council person, very limited law enforcement. And so there's no empathy there or sensitivity to a black person doing whatever. We're going to shoot him and ask questions, and deal with the consequences. Yeah. So if the lesson learned, they should learn the lesson that they must listen to the people, young folks and seniors, and do what's right. The bottom line is just do what's right.
And it goes back to the idea of voting. And in Selma, we were fighting for the right to vote. Unfortunately, some people today don't take advantage of that. So I think the lesson in Ferguson is that what needs to be done, the voter registrations need to take place, more of them, and maybe we can put some people in office who really care, as opposed to the people who are on those jobs and just take us for granted.
Herman?
I would like to say, why is it that they always, when you have an uprising or a riot or whatever, they try to blame it on outside agitators? You know, it's repeated in the news, you know, there's outside agitators. But I guess people are just from the different parts of the country or other states, you know, they come on the scene to try to make a change. Mm-hmm. And possibly the locals might be a little reluctant in terms of economic, you know, sanctions.
Mm-hmm.
And then the same parallel is when Dr. King would come to Selma, Montgomery, he was an outside agitator. Mm-hmm. Not only an outside agitator, they labeled him a communist. Yeah. And any negative word they could attach to him to take light off of discriminatory practices, they demonized the leadership. Mm-hmm. In other words, outside agitators mean, to a certain degree, our darkies are okay until the outside comes in to agitate them. Mm-hmm. Everybody loves everybody. As long as you stay in your place and you don't have the outsiders coming in. Mm-hmm. And in most cases, most movements, you need outside agitators. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. To agitate.
To agitate.
Yeah.
So going to sort of the pieces of the outsiders, because the second march, you know, there was a call after Bloody Sunday, and there was the call for people, and people all across the country felt, you know, emotional about what they had seen. So what did you all think about the leading up to the second march? What did you hear, both if you were there or if you were not? Ms. Harriet, what did you start to hear about the second march on Tuesday?
On Tuesday, Bloody Sunday. 2 days later was the second march. Okay, for me, I don't even think it was on the TV or anything. It was very quiet. Whatever was planned or whatever was going to be done that day was quiet until they did do it. When they did go to the bottom of the bridge.
Is that the
and
case?
That was it.
Is that the case? Was it quiet for you all too? Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay, Herman.
I would communicate with my mother, and she would keep me abreast of, you know, the big figures, James Baldwin, Jackie Robinson, Belafonte. Basically, I guess during that second march, it had shocked the conscience of the nation, and all of the big heavy hitters, you know, came to town and put their
And
force behind
I
it.
didn't, you know, we were foot soldiers, young folks.
Yes.
We weren't privy that Dr. King had sent out the message
Okay.
to all over the country to come to Selma, because folks were coming. The rabbis with their long beards. He pulled from the various communities, many of our white brethren who were already there. And this is the thing that sometimes we leave out, is that, you know, there were a lot of our white brothers that participated. They were there before the march. They were there after the march. But the second march, before the march, we had a mass meeting. And the word, and this is contrary to what I've seen in papers, is that, at least from my knowledge, we were informed that we were going to go to a certain distance and turn around. But some of the leaders say that they didn't know we were going to turn around. But at the mass meeting, that was my understanding. We were going to march because we didn't have anything to go all the way to Montgomery with. You see, we just marched to say we're not going to be deterred, and we marched and turned around peacefully.
Geraldine, what was your understanding?
Him reflecting on that made sense, because that Sunday, nobody had anything but themselves. So they weren't gonna, they were just, I guess it was gonna be a test. But they, you know, wanted everything. And so, in a way, they prepared you for the big one. So they didn't know what they were doing, but they just made it, easy is not the word, but they made it clear for everybody to come in and just participate. I'm sorry people had to shed blood in order, but like there's always a sacrifice somewhere along the line, so maybe this, and it did a wonderful job, because we gave America, citizens, the voting rights, regardless of what they say. Selma did it.
And go ahead, Ms. Harriet.
I was going to say, what I did hear later on was that when the second march was, and they marched down to the bottom of the bridge, that they didn't want to break the law, or something had been said that they couldn't go.
That's right.
And they were waiting for the right to do it. I'll put it like that.
Judge Johnson, the federal judge,
Right.
had not lifted the injunction not to march.
And so what was the feeling then for the third march, when it was known that that was going to be the march from Selma to Montgomery? What was the energy both there and afar? How did you all feel?
Well, from being away from about 75 miles away from home, we made plans to, at the conclusion of the march, to be in Montgomery. So several students from Stillman College made their way to Montgomery on that final day when the speeches were going on, and it was just a tremendous feeling, because probably a couple 100,000 people were there in Montgomery at least.
When they allowed, we were legal at that point. Judge Johnson had lifted the injunction, so it legitimized us marching all the way to Montgomery. And I think one part of the street was the Highway 80 was limited access for the marchers. I marched the first leg. They only allowed, I think it was 100 more or less marchers to go all the way, because it would have really blocked the traffic. And so I did not march all the way. I marched the first leg and the last leg. That's when you say we met in Montgomery, outside of Montgomery, and marched on to the Capitol. It was scary, and you can't glamorize it, because during the march, I think it rained and a whole lot of other things happened. But most folks were afraid of snipers.
Viola Luzzo got killed.
Yeah,
the
but
whole
just
day.
folks behind the trees, etc. But law enforcement, I think the president or George Wallace had deputized, the president had
Yeah,
federalized
federalized, that's right.
all the troops so that it was a safe passage. But you still had hecklers and all the others on the way.
Okay.
But it was something else. And at the end of the march, I do have a picture that was taken that I later found, 30 years later. A vendor was selling it where we had the American flag, and George Wallace, I'm not sure if I'm getting ahead of you.
No, go ahead.
When we got there, we marched, and we had all kind of support, and we begged George Wallace to come out of the Capitol building and say something. He was hiding. They say he was hiding behind the curtains, looking, but he didn't come out, and we felt very, very liberated. And as you know, when Montgomery is the place of the bus boycott. Okay, so I think folks were united all over the world because it just wasn't Selma, just not Montgomery in the U.S. They came from all over the world to participate in that march. And it's a symbol, and the guiding song for most of the marches was "We Shall Overcome." We did overcome certain obstacles. We're still overcoming. But the preachers were instrumental in keeping us focused, keeping us spirit filled, making it seem like it was a spiritual movement. Without the preachers, it wouldn't have happened.
Okay.
I don't think.
Okay. Herman, what did when you watched the march from afar,
Yes.
was it televised?
Yes, yes. Basically, I was glued to the TV, and of course, I guess all of the participants here knew Leroy Moon, the young man that pretended that was with Viola. When she killed. Of course, he played Possum. The only reason that he survived. So it was very, very touching.
Miss Harriet?
I know that my brother, and he was 11 years old, and that's Reggie, that was my youngest brother. My mother let him go, but he marched on to Montgomery with the group, and he would tell us how, they would camp along the side of the road when it was time and slept in tents, and I think people brought them food, and I mean, he was so young, didn't really understand that it was very, very dangerous, so he was like a happy-go-lucky person. But I just felt maybe that he shouldn't have gone, but, I was up here, and she told us to stay where we were, but he went. And I think it made him a better person. He learned a lot. I'm assuming, I can't say that. I'll take that one back, but because he was so young.
The last time I was in Selma, the Bloody Sunday, I was speaking with one of Harriet's mother's students, and I guess during this time, Sam Cooke had the tune out of "Change Is Going to Come," and he was saying that was her anthem. Change is going to come, and basically, it did.
It did.
Yeah.
So let's go back to something we sort of touched on earlier, and I really am very curious and want to hear from all of you what you think about the tenor of voting today, how young adults value voting, and what that feels like for you all having witnessed a fight to vote. What does that sound like? Because I know people who really believe it does not make a difference or matter. So what do you all say about that?
Well, I make sure when I registered to vote so many years ago, and my daughter grew up and then she registered. I try to make sure that she goes and votes regardless of what election it is. And we also take her children so they can see us voting and know that it's important for us to have a voice for all people. But this election that just went by, people say, no, I didn't vote. My vote wasn't going to count anyway. Why should I vote? But that's not acceptable because we fought back in the day for us to vote. So everybody should vote, regardless of whom they were voting for. They should vote.
Mr. Merritt?
Well, having been arrested twice in Selma and put in jail and had confrontation with Sheriff Clark, I knew the value and the sacrifices that were made. But when I graduated from school and moved to Maryland and went to work for the state, I came home one day on a voting day and I got on my sofa and just relaxed, knowing that it was a voting day, and something hit me. See, if you don't get up and walk down the street and vote, all that was done in Selma was in vain. People could not vote. They risked their lives, and they went through all sorts of hardships. And here, I had an opportunity to walk down the street and vote. So it played a very significant, it made a significant impact on me. The fact that I knew then that I would never ever give up the opportunity to vote whenever I had a chance.
I like to take the honor to say, basically, since I've been voting, I had missed an election, municipal, midterm, or whatever, because so much blood, sweat, and tears, sacrifices to get the right to vote in the South. And for someone to say, yes, my vote is not going to matter, it's nonsense.
I think a lot of young folks feel disconnected with the system, and they see corruption, they see a lot of things, and that's why they say, what difference will it make when they see politicians acting out and not caring for the poor and needy and doing different things? So they have opted out. I told my son I would take them to the polls when they were young each time I voted. But once they were voting age, it was that generation that just seemed like it's disillusioned. And so one of my sons, without naming him, he's, what do you call it, when it comes around, what do you call the kids that come back to the house?
Boomerang.
Oh.
Boomerang. They leave and then they come back. And I had to threaten him. I said, are you going to vote? He said, I don't know what I'm going to vote for. And I gave him a few reasons. And then I had to pretty much threaten him. You're out of my house if you're not voting. He thought about that for about 10 minutes. Oh, I'm going to vote. I'm going to vote. That's my language in my house. You got to vote. Because I tried to tell him we paid a big, big price for the ones that we don't even know about that were killed, murdered. And like you, Brother Merritt, I spent 2 weeks in jail at Camp Thomasville. It was at night. I always say Camp Thomasville, and some folks say it was Camp Camden. I don't know where I was. But we were in a cow pen. And part of the strategy was to fill up every jail in Selma. We achieved that, the young folks. And some old, but mostly young. We filled up every jail in Selma, protesting and demonstrating. And so in the end, they had to let us go. And the only reason they didn't charge us, we did not sign a probationary, all kind of tactics were used to discourage us from protesting and trying to secure the right to vote. So for young folks, we were the troublemakers. And so they wanted us to sign a 5-year probationary statement saying that if we participate in another march or demonstration, we would go to jail. So we said no. And so they locked us up, and we stayed in jail for 2 weeks there were so many of us in jail that when breakfast time started about 4 o'clock, we didn't finish until about 8 or 9. And about that time, I would say about 10, it's time for lunch. And so forth. And they fed us some horrible food in jail that most of the women did not eat. And a lot of guys didn't eat except on the 3rd day when they really got hungry. They ate that mush and the other kinds of things. So to stand up, my point is, there are a lot of folks who were jailed for many days, and we couldn't even vote in order to say we are here and we're not going anywhere.
So would you all then agree that then there's a disconnect perhaps between the actions of fighting for the right to vote and being able to earn that, and that is part of the reason why young adults or young people, although as someone who's an advocate for young people, I don't buy into the fact that all young people feel that it's not important to vote, because I think that there's a great population, particularly of younger generations now, who, value the vote. But I do know that certainly amongst some of my peers, I've heard that. So is the disconnect some of what you all think?
I think, remember we had civics in high school? The kids need civics to know what the cities do and what the states do, and eventually the United States. If they knew all of that, it would tie in. And what a difference they made, that one vote.
The direct impact that a
Right.
vote can make. I see. So
Let me say this. I think our young folks are very smart and they're very astute, and they don't like hypocrisy. When President Obama ran, I think they turned out in record numbers because he related to them. The second time he ran, I think they turned out in big numbers, presidential. If folks don't relate to them, they're not coming out. I don't care what you say. They want to hear what they want to hear, and they want to hear the truth. And they're not falling for the okie doke or party lines because they're independents or they go Republican. They're going for the person, most of them. And so that's a thumbs up to them because they're very smart and you can't bamboozle most of them.
yes, Ms. Geraldine.
And to reflect on what he was saying, remember in primary time, election time, and the president going around campaigning, and all these people say, "Oh, I'm not going to vote for him. I'm not going to vote for him." They voted. The husbands and wives, they said, "Oh dear, don't vote for him." They realized what side their bread was buttered on, and they voted for the right man.
So can you all tell me a little bit and briefly, because I just have a couple more questions, sort of life after the marches in Selma and the impact you think that Selma's place in history has had on the city?
Well, not living there, I can only see it from the outside. But I do know that Selma today has elected 2 black mayors of Selma, and currently George Evans is the mayor of Selma now. And having attended class reunions, he's generally come and make an appearance, and he's very optimistic about things happening there in Selma. So at least as far as the voting is concerned, the votes did elect someone who seems to have an interest in the city.
Well, when I'm in Selma, I'm just visiting, and I think coming over the bridge and going through the towns, seems like the buildings are falling down or dilapidating, and it has changed in that way. Maybe one group of people have moved out and they've moved further back out, so the town seems to be dying. From my perspective, I'm not there all the time. I just visit, but that's the way it looks, and especially going across the bridge, going down. That's Highway 80, right? By where we live. I mean, it's just the houses standing up, and nobody's taking interest. Look like we voted, but we're going to Georgia somewhere. We're going to D.C. We're going to live there. We're not going to be worried about what's going on in Selma. But that's what I see.
I'm in and out of Selma. My sister still live there. We have a home. I have a piece of property there. I think I'm disillusioned to a certain point because of the drugs and the killings and the lack of a firm history or pride by some. They could care less. It's just like in a lot of other cities. Drugs have taken over a certain generation. And so, and they'll pull a gun on you and kill you or me real quick, and you don't talk the movement to them until maybe Jubilee time in March. Then they may pay attention, but I don't see the spirit of making the mayor, and I'm maybe talking out of place, accountable. Even though it's a black mayor, you still got to hold a black mayor to the same standard you hold anyone else. Make some improvements, make it welcoming for folks to come back. Sometimes we think we have arrived, and we forget, even the adults, we forget our history. And we try to appease everybody else instead of trying to help that person who is needy, don't have money. And you don't hear people saying, I'm pleading the cause of the poor and needy. They said, I'm for the middle class. But the poor and needy in Selma need help, and they need some good mentors, but I'm not there all the time, so I could be talking off a little bit off.
Understood. Ms. Geraldine?
I kind of agree with what has been said, but like every other city, there are sections of town, whereas our coming over the bridge should be nice. They have started Tepper's, remember Tepper's? It's like one of the highest buildings. And they are renovating it, and they'll put a roof on it. So when I go home again, I bring you up. But it should be nice as we enter and go down Broad Street, since that is our only main street. Some of the other streets are okay, but within the city, you do see a lot of houses that could be renovated. A lot of work that could be done.
I think one thing too, that the population has tremendously been reduced. Right around the time I graduated from high school, I think the population of Selma was about 27,000 people. As of the 2010 census, is at 20,000. Now, a lot of factors are involved in that too, because 3 miles outside of Selma, there was a U.S. military base. And many people in Selma would have employment from that base. And so the economic base, with the people leaving the city, the tax base, the income from taxes have been dramatically reduced. So there are a lot of factors involved as far as the economic situation there in Selma.
So one thing I would like, sort of as we conclude our conversation, because I want to be cognizant of everyone's time, Could you each go through and let us know whether or not you will be at the 50th anniversary? And then could you also describe, as a Selma native, what is one word that you would say describes Selma, either the city or the residents? Mr. Hunter, would you
Yes,
start?
I will. We're having a class of 65 class reunion up this way in the DC area next year. I will attend the one down in Selma, the Jubilee celebration. It was many years later that I realized that there was a Jubilee celebration going on every year. It's a good celebration time, and as you know, John Lewis and others, he bring the big politicians down to experience the bridge crossing. Selma, to me, could capitalize on being this historical city. In Selma, when you read the history of Selma, I know I'm going on a little bit, it's rich in history. Now, slaves would come off of ships coming down the Alabama River. There is a tunnel in Selma that they would offload. Everybody try to keep that quiet. There should be an attraction. We've got to become more creative in the folks that, the influx of tourists that come to Selma, okay? And take advantage of it, the thousands that come. And so we just got to take advantage of the tourism. The mayor got to step forward, and there are a lot of things that can be done, but I'm in Maryland, and talk is cheap. You know, it's the guys that live there. Now, what was the other part of your question?
One word that you would say describes Selma?
Courageous.
Okay.
Yes, I will be there for the 50th anniversary. I will enjoy seeing, there was one special person that stayed with us, well, in my mother's house during the movement. His name was Reverend Bernard Lafayette, and he was a SCLC, but huh?
He's here. He's been up here forever.
No, but he's in Tuskegee right now. But I haven't seen him since I was in college. But he's going to be there, and a lot of, bring back memories. And I just think it'll be just a wonderful thing, a wonderful place to be at that time. Yes.
And what is a word that you would say describes Selma, if you could pick one?
Trying to be reborn.
Reborn. Okay.
Yeah, I plan to attend the 50 Bloody Sunday commemoration. And in terms of describing Selma, I would say that it's a wonderful city. In terms of where we have gone as our people, in terms of the voters registration, it's just opened up a lot of avenues, not only for people of Selma, but across the country. It gave them the awareness. Even the ones that were in the North, they probably thought that they were free, but basically the Fergusons or the Tavon Gray, that tells a different story. So it's a constant battle.
Okay. Yes, I do. By all means, plan to attend the Jubilee celebration. I've never attended it before, but I've had some. But last year when we had our 50th class reunion, many of us decided to make an effort to come. And how can I describe Selma? Historically significant.
Geraldine?
Yes, I do plan to attend the celebration. I'm going the week before, so I will miss the influx and I'm leaving the week after. I just consider Selma home. I love it. It's small, and it's home.
Well, I want to thank all of you for your time and your thoughts, and we are very grateful, and will hopefully continue to be able to have more discussions and hear more stories of, like you all said, the unsung heroes. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we stop down, I'd like to get, before anybody moves, can I get everybody to just sit very still, no moving, no speaking, please? We're just gonna record the sound of the room, so that if they need to do some things in editing to cut out a cough or something like that, they can do that. So, just everybody very still, no moving, no speaking. This is room tone, moderator only. No moving, please. This is room tone. Geraldine? This is room tone. Bill? This is room tone. Herman? Kind of waiting for the truck here. This is room tone. Harriet? And this is room tone. Phil? And this is going to be room tone all up. You just need to remember that your room tone is at the end, and thank you very much. I'm going to check tape